Hi friends, it's your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about an incredible new Dungeons & Dragons box set, the Dungeons & Dragons Stranger Things Welcome to the Hellfire Club box set. So this is really unique. It does something that no other box set has ever allowed us to do. It opens Dungeons & Dragons into a new realm of play, experience, control, and layers. This set will allow you to play a player playing a player character. And it also allows you to construct the group that player will belong to, the player group, right? So Hellfire Club is a player group. And then you are playing players playing the player character, right? And the great thing about Dungeons & Dragons and what allows it to accomplish so much is this remove it has, right? And this deepens the remove. It actually puts the remove 2 levels higher, allowing us to do even more social experimentation with Dungeons & Dragons. It's really incredible. What's interesting is, let's talk about this era of play, this 80s era of play. This 80s era of play is extremely unique and extremely exciting. And the reason why is this is a persecution era. The 1980s and the 2010s both had player groups who were persecuted by distinct American groups who said you're not allowed to own Dungeons & Dragons, to play Dungeons & Dragons, to experience Dungeons & Dragons. It's just not allowed. And these groups did not want people to play less. They wanted Dungeons & Dragons destroyed, literally destroyed and taken off the planet Earth, right? Burned, right? Physically, then digitally. And so in the 1980s, they were physically burning books, right? And this was a very unusual time. So what's interesting though is I had already talked that now this is going to allow people to experience this, right? And and play in this era. And for some players, they weren't around to experience this. But there's also something I didn't talk about, and that's those who wish to be persecuted again. This is an incredible thing. I remember many years ago, right? I worked at a place that had 2 buildings. They had a new building and they had an old building, right? And the new building was so nice, and the old building was nice now as well. But 10 years before, it had been terrible, right? And the older employees, the employees who had been there longer, right? They would talk about their days in the early old building, and they would say, water would drip down on my computer would fritz. And they would be like, and the heating didn't work, and you'd come in and you have to wear your jacket at your desk. And you were like, well, wait, Bob, like, that's a great story, but you didn't say that like, oh, it was terrible. You said it wistfully, like you missed those days, right? And it was really kind of odd, right, to hear. And it never left me, right? And I absolutely saw it with with Dungeons & Dragons. So there are people who are playing Dungeons & Dragons today who played in the 1980s, right? And they're like, yeah, I go to my library and I sit down and I play Dungeons & Dragons, and literally nobody even stops to ask what's going on. The dice roll across the table and nobody cares. And that is really fascinating, right? I find that incredibly fascinating that that there's this, like, that they miss the persecution, right? And it's really profound that someone would desire to be persecuted, right? So why would someone desire to be persecuted, right? Well, I think one thing is the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. It's when people don't care. And what's interesting is people who love Dungeons & Dragons, they protected it. I'm one of the people who loves Dungeons & Dragons. I protect it. I literally do the opposite of burning the books. I collect them. I put them on my shelf. I care for them. I take them down. I read them. I literally care for these books, right? But the people who hated Dungeons & Dragons, they didn't want them not read. They wanted them destroyed, right? And I think that the people who were persecuted realized these people it wasn't that they didn't care about them. They cared too much about them, right? To the point where they wanted to control them. And what's shocking is I think there are a lot of players who miss when they were persecuted, who miss when there was a risk to playing Dungeons and Dragons, when there was a cost, when you were in rebellion to American culture itself, right? And now it's, parents are trying to get their kids to play D&D. It's a completely different world. Like it's literally the opposite of persecution, in that we have massive mainstream acceptance, right? But I think that's an interesting thing to recognize too, is that Welcome to the Hellfire Club will not only allow people who have never experienced persecution to experience persecution, but it will also allow people who miss being persecuted to be persecuted again. That's astounding. Like that is astounding. That it is a thing that is desired. But it truly is. It is a thing that is desired. Really, really fascinating. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.